thanks everyone for taking time to join. So my name is Andy Brown. I'm Product Director here at Coacho, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Matt Chandler, who works in technical pre-sales here at Coacho also, and has quite a lot of expertise in the subject we'll be discussing today, which is all around optimizing your Microsoft Cloud spend, and in particular, some of the demonstration of the tool sets that we use as part of the delivery of our services in this area, which I think help bring that to life for you. So, in terms of the agenda for today, you'll be pleased to hear you've only got a short introduction from me before we actually get to the expert and someone who will go through all the detail. But I'll start off just with a bit about Coacho for those of you who've not come across us before, and thank you for taking time to join us. I'll set the scene with what we're seeing out there in the market and the reason why I expect you're on the call today. And then just a very high level, just discussing our offerings in this area, and in particular, how we're looking to help customers when it comes to spend optimization. And then I'll be handing over to Matt to take us through the Scout portal, which is the tool that we actually use behind the delivery of our services. So we'll dig straight in. So in terms of Coacho, Coacho are obviously a Microsoft specialist partner. We've got specializations across a number of areas, obviously, including infrastructure, endpoint, cloud security, etc. Very strong pedigree in terms of our delivery with Microsoft. We're one of 7 partners globally with all of the security accreditations and verified XDR. And very proud of the fact we're also a member of MISA, the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association, which is, it's really important that we feed back into that ecosystem of Microsoft partners and customers with our views on the market and help them with the further development of their solutions going forwards. In terms of Coacho as an organization, it's just over 400 of us across a number of countries. We are a growing organization. We've got clients, all kinds of clients that come to us for help with their delivery of services, everything from sort of mid-market all the way through to global brands and some of the logos that you will see on screen there. Company's growing, pleased to say, and we're proud of the fact that we really do help our customers across the delivery of a number of solutions on the Microsoft stack. So in terms of our approach to things, we're all about ultimately helping customers with the delivery of a number of key technology areas. So everything in the world of end user compute, everything from the supply of devices, whether that's laptops, mobile phones, whatever it may be, all the way through to management security of those front end devices that ultimately are the face of IT for a lot of organizations, through to the ongoing security of everything, including the back-end cloud security infrastructure, the endpoints themselves, etc., all covered under that security banner. The platform, which is really where we're talking about today, which is increasingly anchored around the Azure stack and M365. So those are the kind of the core pillar services, but obviously there's a lot more that sits under there. And then finally, on the application side, a lot of work where we help people with data strategy, application, how to modernize applications, etc., and how you can actually really create application strategy going forwards for the future stack. So in terms of what we do across all of this, we can do everything from one-time engagements, and for some customers we will come in and just be that kind of for hire professional services, all the way through to rather uniquely in IT, we've got that full business transformation practice, so we actually can talk the language of end user adoption as well. And that can go all the way through as well to full managed service and support, which is really what we're talking about today, about how we can help customers with managing cost, but also manage security operations as well, which is not the subject for today, but a big, obviously important area for IT strategy. Deep expertise, people often ask, what are you famous for? So, we are known as the identity people to help with the intra side. Endpoint is clearly something that we've got a long pedigree of delivery there. And I guess around service and security today, which is what we'll be talking about. So that's the intro. In terms of set the scene before we hand over and look into this, I guess it's worth kind of looking at what's going on out there in the market. So I mean, fundamentally, over the last decade or so, there's been this massive shift to the cloud. And what that has created is this concept of everything as a service. And fundamentally, that's quite a big change in terms of the way IT spend is looked at now. So we're seeing the shift towards more OpEx type spend from what was traditionally a CapEx type budget spend, where you would buy your kit and you would choose how long you were going to run it for and sweat that asset, etc. Whereas now it's kind of much more of a annual bill type model. For most organizations, and indeed for every organization that we will talk to, this will be anchored around the Microsoft stack. So Azure and M365 are kind of the foundation stones of a modern IT strategy. And that's obviously an area where we do a lot of work for customers. And this is a big shift in budgeting and billing. As I mentioned, with that shift from the CapEx model to the OpEx model is something that is now changing the way that people are looking at spend, and indeed how they try and apportion spend as well. So how do you actually say who's accounting for what consumption is becoming an increasing challenge? And I guess the fundamental point here that as everything is finally transitioned across, this is a challenge that's getting harder and harder. Things are getting more complex, and it's ultimately getting more expensive, and budgets are squeezed. It's a cost-constrained world that we're increasingly living in for IT budget and spend. And this is a challenge that we're seeing across the board. This isn't sector specific or UK specific even. Because I think if you look at the macro view, and this is a great slide to kind of just bring up how, if you look at the trend over, that's a 5-year window there, you can see that the total number of users on Azure itself is fundamentally about level, that we're not seeing a massive increase in terms of the number of users. But what we are seeing is a very big upward trend in terms of the total overall revenue that Microsoft are taking there. And that's great. That's actually, something that is really driving forward IT services now for many, many organizations, and Microsoft sitting at the heart of that. That's a good thing. But what it is also now doing is, creating a service line that can sometimes be a little bit opaque in terms of how do you apportion that billing, as I said, and how do you actually try and optimize that on an ongoing basis, which has led not just on Microsoft, but across the board, the concept of the emergence of FinOps, which is a term that a couple of years ago, no one would have even known what it was, but it's been a real emerging area of expertise that we're now seeing in terms of, this cloud spend, OpEx cloud spend, is now a top table conversation for many organizations. This is a significant line in the overall budget of an organization. And the emergence of FinOps is something that we've seen kind of driven out of the US. And that's not specific to the US in any other way then. The US was one of the early adopters to cloud itself. So the challenges that we're seeing in the UK will just have been challenges that were ultimately, they came out first in the US because they were just that bit earlier on the journey. And to that end, shout out to the FinOps Foundation. So this is a great website I would recommend you have a look at if you've not come across them before. And they really are the organization that are kind of driving the frameworks and the best practices for how do you start to look at this. And this is not specific to Microsoft. This is very much about how do you actually look to manage your OpEx and cloud spend on a better basis going forwards. And it's in the clue is in the title. It's obviously the emergence of the function that sits on the boundary of what was traditionally operational IT and finance. I would also recommend looking at their key annual report in terms of what some of the priorities are that they were seeing. This is obviously dated last year, now in 2025, but you will see that some of the big macro trends that are there really are common conversations that we will see with most organizations. And the number one thing will be, how can I make sure that we're not wasting money now? Because everything is effectively a bit like your old mobile phone bill. If you're on pay as you go, you're going to be thinking a lot harder about how many texts you're sending. It's the same basic principle, but at a much larger scale. So how can I actually remove unnecessary spend, but then next down is how can I actually start to optimize that spend going forwards? Because ultimately service providers will give you deals for committing to spend over a longer term rather than just being on a pure pay-as-you-go type model. And you'll see the list there, kind of these are common trends that we will see across most organizations. So to that end, Coach have created FinOps-based services, and they are anchored around Azure and M365. So these are our optimization manager services, which really are about us looking at the environment on an ongoing basis and making recommendations and best practice in terms of how can you manage this more effectively on an ongoing basis. And as part of the delivery of these services, we use a tool called Scout, which is plugged in to the data that sits behind Microsoft M365 and Azure, and really does bring it to life in some really useful ways. And it helps us not only deliver good service, but it also helps visualize the environment and bring it to life for the customer as well, because the customer also will have access to the tool. So to that end, I think probably the best way to bring this to life for you is I'll hand over to Matt now and ask him to take us through a demonstration of the portal and what its capabilities are.
Cool, thanks, Andy. I'm just going to try and share up my screen. Can you just confirm that you can see it?
Yeah, we can.
Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. As Andy said, my name is Matt Chandler, Technical Pre-Sales here at Cocho, and what I wanted to do today is just take you through the Scout tool. What I like to do when we go through these processes is just think about things like spend, so that's our Azure usage and also our M365 licensing. Think about things like security, and then also a little bit around the productivity. So are we making full use of the licenses that we've got? Just with regards to a little bit around the sort of the tool itself, it sits in its own Azure environment, and essentially when we onboard, it's a simple 4-step process to onboard. That would go ahead and create an enterprise app, which then gives us read-only into your environment to then help us generate these reports. Everything that you see or everything you see within the report would be based on your numbers as well and your costs. So what you'll see here is my demo tenant. However, if we were to do something for you, then you would actually be get everything based on your costs. What you will notice within here is that all of these reports, it's all Power BI driven. So we've got a lot of the good features that we can use within that tool. And just one final thing with regards to the config, this isn't just a single subscription or a single tenant. We can set up environments so that they have multi-tenanted, multi-subscriptions. And if we go into the initial piece around the Azure side of things, you can see straight away here when I've gone into just my overview that I can see the number of subscriptions I have. I can see what my costs were for the past 12 months and also over the past month. And in here, I can then start drilling purely just based on those subscription side of things and see where my costs are. So I can go into my top line. I can see that there's services in North Europe, and then I can start drilling in and seeing actually how much they were costing me over the past few months. One interesting piece that I like on this initial sort of cost overview screen is just this monthly trend up here in the top right hand corner, so I can see where my costs are going on a month by month basis, what that trend is compared to the average. If I now start drilling into the actual reports a little bit more, essentially this tool was built out of development people realizing that the stills that they were getting from Microsoft were very difficult to decipher. So part of this tool was originally thought about just how can we make it a bit easier for people to understand where our billing is and what we're paying for in Azure. When I've gone into my cost allocation, a lot of this is thought about with potentially maybe charging back to business units, different areas of the business. So this tool is really here to help you to sort of understand where that billing is and ideally charge back. I'll just go into my resource group so we can start to change some of the way we view these reports. So we can use, view our reports by resource group. So if you were to charge back by resource group, we can quite quickly see where our charges are for each different resource groups. And again, these can be broken down so we can then click into it and actually see where my storage costs are for this particular resource group using the great tools within Power BI. So we can view these by subscription, as we saw earlier on, by resource group, publisher. We can even then start doing things around Azure tags as well. So if you tag your resources in Azure, we can pull these tags in so we can then start to see or then charge back our billing based on those Azure tags. And then one final piece we've got in here is smart tags. So smart tags are essentially tags that we can set up within the Scout tool itself. So sometimes what we do is we would give access to your finance team to be able to view these reports. And so they would potentially want to create their own tags as opposed to relying on the techies doing their Azure tags and then potentially changing. We can actually allow so people in the back end to actually put in their own tags into this environment so that they can then see the billing in the way that they want to see it, as opposed to how we would potentially configure the Azure environment itself. So there's a variety of different ways or lenses that we can apply here to help us to understand where our billing is. But this just gives you a quick overview of the side of tools that we can give you. If we then go into our optimize piece, which I think is probably some of the main focus around this and possibly why most of you have joined the call today. So when we go in, when it eventually loads, what we'll start to see is some recommendations around how we can start to make some savings in our environment. At a very high level, what it'll do, it will show us where our potential savings are. So low estimate here, I've got just under 3% savings I could make, with a high estimate of just under 7%. The reality is that what we find for customers is that we would normally set those ranges between 10 and 25%. However, it very much depends on your environment. And then at a high level, we can also see what those cost savings or what those percentage savings would be with regards to actual monetary savings on a monthly and an annual basis. So in this instance, I could potentially be saving just over £11,000 a year by implementing the recommendations that we see here. With regards to the recommendations that we are seeing, so some people may be sitting here and thinking, well, yes, this is just Azure Advisor stuff. This isn't just information that's coming from the Azure Advisor piece. There is also the developers' sort of knowledge when they've created the tool and with their many years working in Azure to help them to develop this tool and understand where we can be potentially making savings. So what we've got a variety of different options here where we can see where we can be saving some money. If I click into my reserved instances, what it will then start to show us is the money that we can be saving with regards to configuring reserved instances and whereabouts we can be doing that. So we've got a very quick understanding of the money that we could be saving with regards to reserved instances in this case. One thing to point out is that this, again, it is a read-only tool, so it's not a case of I can just start clicking on things and things will automatically happen in my Azure environment. It's purely based here as give us a guideline of how we can make changes or make savings as opposed to actually enforcing them, because I think the last thing we want to do is to be enforcing changes from a third-party tool, which is then potentially going to cause problems with the actual production side of things. So some of the other key areas around the optimization piece. So we've got things like idle and oversized services. So again, people are sort of probably specking up services in Azure and they're not really understanding the full utilization. So this tool will actually tell us where we potentially overspec VMs in this case. So we can see our virtual machine utilization. And then it's going to make us some recommendations as well around how we can actually change that and ideally save us some money. And if I just go back to my optimization again, one final piece on it, certainly within this screen that I like is the zombie resources. So if I can click in here, what this will show me is essentially resources that were created and assigned to other resources which have since been deleted. In this instance, normally we think about that as disks that have not been deleted when a VM has been deleted, for example. So we can see quite quickly where we could be saving some money. And yes, okay, this is a high level. I can only be saving £37 a year, but essentially these are resources that we're paying for that aren't associated with anything and so can be deleted. If we then change track slightly and just go into our security side of things. So what this will do, it will give us essentially this tool. There's a number of different reports within here to help us to understand what's going on in our environment. So this isn't just a case of looking at the billing and looking at the optimization. Yes, they're fantastic pieces, but it also gives us a all-round understanding of how our environment has been configured. So we can touch on a little bit on the security piece here. So I can see here that I've got 127 accounts that have been assigned admin or assigned admin roles, so across 27 roles. So I can hopefully get a bit of an understanding of it, actually who's doing what within my environment and what roles they've been assigned. I'm just going to drop into the networking side of the security piece, because I find this incredibly interesting. Just the whole, it's telling me straight away the number of public IPs I've got. I think of that large environments where multiple people are going and creating resources and all sorts. Having that visibility that actually there may be potential vulnerabilities raised here. This tool is a great way of helping to understand exactly what has been configured within the Azure environment. So that's a quick overview of the Azure side of things. If I then drop into the M365 side, again, we'll go into the sort of the high level stuff. So we'll see our company profile, which will be very sort of similar to the Azure piece in just giving us that top level view of what's going on. So I can now see that now that this is loaded, I can see I've got my demo company, my tenant name. I've got 134 licensed accounts, and within that, I'm actually paying just over £7,000 a month in licenses. And most interestingly on this screen is I can actually see quite quickly where I could be potentially saving some money. So I've got just over £1,500 worth of licenses that I'm paying for in a month on a monthly basis, which I'm not consuming. And that equates to 78% license consumption. In an ideal world, we want to be getting this number as high as possible. So if this number is relatively low, then we are potentially wasting some money somewhere. Another thing that I like around just even this basic screen is just our cost per license account. So we see an average cost of the number of licenses or how much we're paying for our licenses compared to our licensed accounts. So this is always a good number to hopefully help us to understand where we're spending money. And then we've also got things in here just at a very high level around domains that we've got configured and then potential external access as well. So there's a lot of different reports in here to help you understand what's going on within the M365 environment and how to potentially manage it a bit better as well. If I drop into my licenses, so what this will then start to tell us is a little bit of the information that we've previously seen around costs, but also start to break down some of those licenses for us. So we can see here that how much we're paying on a monthly basis, and say that the assigned license percentage as well. At a very high level, we're also seeing the license spend, so we can see our top 5 licenses and where we're spending our money. So we can see here that I am paying just under £3,500 a month for M365 E3 licenses. I've also got some Project P5s, Power BI, and so on. And another interesting report that I find, or another interesting piece on this page, is actual accounts with licenses assigned. So I can see here very quickly that I've got 27 accounts that have licenses signed where they haven't been signed into for over 181 days. So there's potential here for me to start making some changes to my licensing and ideally saving some money. And with that, if I go into my optimize piece, what we're going to see here is a variety of different recommendations based on how we can not only save some money, so the financial side of things, but also looking at that security side of things and the operations as well. So we can see here I could potentially be saving £3,500 a month just by making some changes with regards to my licensing. It looks here I've got a lot of user accounts that are probably stale and need to be deleted as well. So this gives us an overall understanding of how secure our environment is and are we getting value for money out of it. What I'll just do, I'll just drop into our cost optimization to show us a little bit more about where I could be saving some money. So this screen is very much like the Azure screen where it's going to be telling us where our zombie resources are and so on. First and foremost, so we've got our savings ranges as we had with the Azure piece. So in this instance, 23 to 50%. With potential annual savings of nearly £44,000. Again, savings ranges vary from customer to customer. What we're generally seeing is, again, that 10 to 25%. However, we have seen some customers where we're up to 65% and we could be potentially saving them 7-figure numbers based on their licensing over a year. So this really does give you the visibility of where you could be potentially saving that money. And again, we can drop into some of these. So if I go into my zombie resources, it will then start to tell me a bit more information around where I'm spending my money and what I can be doing to save something. So in this instance, I can see I've got disabled accounts with licenses assigned. So I've got 27 of them. And if I can expand them, yes, you're just seeing the user ID at this point within your environments. We would actually be able to drill down and show the actual username itself. However, I can drill into that a little bit more, and then I can start to see what licenses have been assigned to those users as well. So it's giving you a very quick way of understanding where you're spending money which isn't being fully utilized. You've also got things like accounts which are enabled but aren't active, and then licenses assigned to them. So again, I can see a user here. We've got spending £42 a month on licensing, which essentially whilst they may be active, they haven't logged in for a long period of time. So we're seeing quite quickly say that where we can make those savings, where we've potentially got some security gaps as well. We've got accounts that aren't active. If we go into the oversubscribed piece, we'll drill into this, and we can start to see. I'm going to sort that via savings. We can see here that I could be potentially saving just under £1,000 a month with my Project P5 licenses. So essentially, the system has recognised that I've got 22 licenses, or I've paid for 22 Project P5 licenses. However, they're not assigned to anyone. So essentially, I'm wasting just under £1,000 a month by having those licenses. So again, these are things that certainly in my experience, people aren't necessarily fully aware of. And when you actually start to show them these reports, it brings it all to life, really. I do think that a lot of this information that we're showing you, it is all available within the Azure and M365 portals. However, it's not always easy to see, certainly when we think about users and when they last logged in and licenses that are assigned. There's no real tools that really match all that up, whereas this will do it for us, and quite quickly as well. And then finally, if I just go into my recommendations around downgrading as well. So I think this is important. So what this will do, it will tell us where we've got users that have been assigned licenses that they're not making the full use of. In this case, we've got users that we've got 10 users that have got Project P5 licenses or P3 licenses. And the reality is that they're not using all of the functionality within that license, and we could easily downgrade them to a P1, and in this instance, probably save them just over £350. So there's lots of information within here that helps you to understand how people are what people are using, and potentially what licenses we could be assigning them. If I then go into my security assessment, because I personally find this piece fascinating, just to give us a bit more oversight of what's going on within our environment. So the first thing you're going to see here is our secure score. And to be honest, we probably all understand what our secure score is and where we can find it within the M365 portal, certainly. But what I find interesting in this screen is the piece around what my secure score could be. So in this instance, I've got M365 E5 licenses, and actually my secure score could go up to 93% if I was to enable all of the features that I get within that E5 license. So yes, whilst some of this information may be fairly obvious, actually understanding where we could be with regards to our licensing stance is very interesting. If we then go into our security at a glance, what you'll start to see here is there's going to be a lot of information in this screen. However, a lot of this information can be very useful to you, certainly at a high level, to understand what's going on. So if I start thinking about my authentication methods, so I can see here very quickly how many users have been configured for MFA, and also I've got 8 accounts here that I can see that have been excluded from MFA as well. So we can start to understand a little bit more about how our environment's being used, how users are interacting with that environment. We've also got things like cloud administrative accounts and shadow IT, so potential additional apps that have been configured within your tenant. It gives you a little bit of visibility around that. And then things like conditional access policies are always good to know. We've also then got things around external files. So these are files that are potentially saved in OneDrive and SharePoint Online, which are then saved externally. Now, I think that it's very important to understand these sort of files, or whether we are sharing externally nowadays, because the simplicity of being able to do it. A lot of people are doing it, but actually, is our environment secure, and are we locking it down as well as we could be? So giving us that instant visibility around how many files are shared externally, it really is important to have. And say, I don't feel that it's necessarily that obvious within the M365 portals themselves. And then finally, just on this screen that I want to touch on is our admin accounts. And I'm just going to drill into this one just to give us a little bit more of an overview about our admins. So as with the Azure piece, we could see here that we've got the total number of admins. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my detailed view at this point and start to get a little bit more information around where my admin accounts have been assigned. So I can see here that I've got 5 global administrator roles or users that have got global administrator. I can click on this using the tools in Power BI, and then I can start to see where those users are and when they last logged in. I think more importantly on this screen as well is just that MFA enable piece as well. So I can see here that I've got an account or a couple of accounts that don't have MFA enabled. So I can click in here and see quite quickly where I should be potentially enabling MFA because I've got an account with an admin role. So I'd say lots of different features in here around helping you understand the security posture of your M365 environment, as well as sort of the optimization piece around savings. And then one final piece I just want to touch on is just the sort of the utilization, so the productivity or the adoption. So what we'll see here is the number of users are actually using each of the tools within the M365 suite. So we can see here, generally we've got 60% Exchange users, Teams, SharePoint Online. To be honest, I'm not overly fussed about monitoring them. Yes, it's good to know, and yes, we want to make sure that people are using those tools. However, I think the really important for me on this page is certainly when we think about the add-on licenses that we're now having to pay for. So our Copilot licenses, which aren't necessarily the cheapest in the world if we're paying for them on a monthly basis, we want to make sure that the people that have been assigned those licenses are using them. So I can see in here, I've got 8 users that have been assigned Copilot licenses, and thankfully they're all using them. So we get that visibility to make sure that actually what we're giving to our users is being utilized. We've then got a variety of different reports, as you can see here on the left-hand side, with regards to SharePoint, storage, Exchange, and so on. I'm just going to drop into our storage one. And what it will do is it will just give us a high-level understanding of how much storage or how much data we've got stored in our M365 tenants, and that's split across Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Online, etc. Also, what I find quite interesting is the number of files that are also inactive as well. So it gives you a flavour for actually how many people are using the environments. And yeah, so we've got a variety of different reports within here, SharePoint tools, so we can see where we've got active SharePoint sites. When we start thinking about, do we need some sites? Should we be doing some cleanup? There's a lot of reports within here that will help us to understand exactly how our environment's been used. So that's been a very, very high-level overview of the tool, the Scout tool that we can provide. So ideally gives you a lot of information around those optimizations. And one thing I would like to just bring up finally is our health check. I'm just going to go into the Azure health check. So what we can provide is a free 30-day health check, which will give us some high-level information around how you can potentially optimize your environment. So what this will do, so it's very similar to the overall product. However, what we can't do is we can't drill in and see where we could be making some changes. But if we were to enroll a tenant into this, it would take a few days for the data to be populated. But essentially, we can then see at quite a high level how much you're spending, and then also how much you could be potentially saving as well. And we can provide this, say it's free of charge 30 days, we can provide this for across the Azure piece and the M365 piece. And I think with that, I will hand back over to Andy.
One way to really bring this to life is to actually undertake a health check with us. So we will offer this we basically can do a quick onboard, as Matt alluded to, plug this into your environment and give you access to that initial health check view. And that health check view is really powerful in terms of that it will give you the potential savings that could be made, but clearly, as mentioned, it's not going to tell you how to do it. If you want to know how to do it, clearly you need to take the product itself. And the product itself is clearly something you can have a conversation with us about. If you want to do that, we would normally deliver that as part of our services, as mentioned. I'm sure one of your sales contacts will happily have a conversation with you about that. But what I will also mention is for customers who transfer their CSP licensing to us here at Cocho, everything you've seen today and the service wrap that goes with it is something that we can offer as part of our CSP offering. So as well as doing all the things that you would normally expect as part of from your CSP provider in terms of support and billing, etc., this is something that we actually offer to our customers to actually help manage and control M365 and Azure consumption and spend as well. So Please do get in touch. Seems an obvious way for you to potentially, at the very least, get visibility, but potentially also maintain and control your spend going forwards. So to that end, we have reached the end of the webinar a few minutes early, but look, thank you very much for taking time to join us. Hope you found that useful. If you do have any questions, then please do get in touch, and yeah, we'll catch you on the next one, as they say. So thank you.